Every culture on Earth has figured out its own way to cook meat over fire, and the differences are not small. The techniques, the cuts, the fuel, the sauces, and the rituals behind them change completely depending on where in the world you happen to be standing. Some of these traditions stretch back thousands of years. Others were invented less than a century ago, often born out of poverty, migration, or pure accident. And the word barbecue itself has an origin that almost nobody has heard. This is every major barbecue style around the world explained. In the United States, barbecue means low and slow. Tough cuts of meat cooked for hours over indirect heat and wood smoke until they become tender enough to fall apart. And the style that sits at the center of the American barbecue conversation is Central Texas brisket. It was developed by German and Czech immigrant butchers who settled in the Texas Hill Country in the mid-1800s, in small towns like Lockhart, Luling, and Elgin. Before refrigeration existed, unsold cuts of beef would spoil quickly, so the butchers started smoking them over post oak to preserve what they couldn't sell. The brisket, a tough, cheap cut from the chest of the cow that nobody particularly wanted, turned out to be perfect for this. It needed a long time over heat anyway, and smoking it at around 225 degrees Fahrenheit for 10 to 16 hours transformed it into something rich and impossibly tender. The seasoning is famously simple, just coarse salt and black pepper, no sauce. The saying in Texas is that if you need sauce, the pitmaster did something wrong. But Texas is only one piece of American barbecue. In eastern North Carolina, the tradition is whole hog dressed in a thin vinegar and red pepper sauce. Cross into South Carolina and the sauce turns neon yellow, a mustard-based recipe that German immigrants brought with them. In Kansas City, an African-American cook named Henry Perry started selling slow-smoked ribs wrapped in newspaper for 25 cents a slab around 1908 in the 18th and Vine Jazz District. His death certificate listed his occupation simply as barbecue man. Kansas City went on to become the home of burnt ends, thick sweet tomato molasses sauce, and the American Royal, the largest barbecue competition in the world. But the word barbecue itself did not come from Texas, or from anywhere in the United States. It came from the Caribbean. The Taino people, the indigenous inhabitants of the Caribbean islands, used a raised wooden framework of green sticks called a barbacoa to smoke and dry meat and fish over embers. Spanish colonizers recorded the word in the early 1500s, and it slowly traveled into English over the next century and a half. The earliest known English use of it appeared in a book about Jamaica, published in the 1660s, and Jamaica is exactly where one of the most distinctive barbecue traditions in the world was created. Jerk is both a seasoning and a cooking method, and its origin is a story of survival. When enslaved Africans escaped into the Blue Mountains of Jamaica's interior during the 17th and 18th centuries, they became known as the Maroons. Living as fugitives in dense mountain forest, they combined African smoking techniques with the Taino tradition of cooking over pimento wood, which is the wood of the allspice tree. They seasoned meat with allspice berries, Scotch bonnet peppers, thyme, scallion, garlic, and ginger, and they cooked in covered pits dug into the ground, partly to trap the smoky flavor inside the meat and partly to hide the rising smoke from the British soldiers who were hunting them. The word jerk most likely comes from the Spanish charqui, meaning dried meat, the same root that gave English the word jerky. Today, jerk chicken and pork are grilled openly over pimento wood coals, and the tradition has spread far beyond the island. But the original method was meat smoked low and hidden in the earth, a way of cooking that doubled as an act of resistance. Jerk was born from fire kept invisible. In South Africa, fire is meant to be seen by everyone. The South African braai is far more than a backyard cookout. The word comes from the Afrikaans braaivleis, meaning grilled meat, and it sits at the heart of South African social life in a way that few other food traditions do anywhere in the world. It crosses racial lines, income levels, and cultural backgrounds. In a country with 11 official languages and a deeply complex history, the braai is one of the few things nearly everyone shares. The tradition blends indigenous khoikhoi and San open-fire cooking with the methods Dutch settlers brought in the 17th century. It is always done over wood or charcoal, never gas. Purists favor specific local hardwoods like cameel doring, also known as camel thorn, or sekkelbos, the sickle bush. each one producing a different heat profile and a different flavor in the smoke. The centerpiece of most bras is boerewors, a coarsely ground beef and pork sausage spiced with coriander, clove, and nutmeg, coiled into one continuous spiral on the grill and never allowed to split open. Alongside it, you will often find saucides, skewers marinated in a Cape Malay apricot and spice mixture, lamb chops, and the braai brugie, a toasted sandwich cooked right on the coals with cheese, tomato, and onion. On the side sits pap, a firm maize porridge, with chakalaka, a spiced vegetable relish. Heritage Day on September 24th officially doubles as National Braai Day in South Africa. The idea behind it is simple. Whatever language you speak, whatever your background, you can stand around a fire together. South Africa celebrates its braai once a year on the calendar. In Argentina, it happens every single Sunday. The Argentine asado is not a barbecue in the way most English speakers understand the word. It is a ritual. It began with the gauchos of the Pampas, the cowboys of the South American grasslands, after Spanish conquistadors introduced cattle to the region in the 1500s. Cooking meat over fire became central to gaucho identity, and the tradition has barely changed since. A proper asado is cooked over embers, never over open flame. Logs burn in a side fire pit called a brasero, and once they collapse into glowing coals, those coals are shoveled under the parrilla, the iron grill grate. The person managing the fire is the asador, and the role carries real weight. Nobody else touches the grill. When the meal ends, everyone gives the asador a round of applause. The food follows a strict order. First come the achuras, the offal, including sweetbreads, kidneys, and morcilla, which is blood sausage. Then chorizo. The prime cuts come last, including asado de tira, short ribs, vacío, flank, and entraña, skirt steak. Seasoning is coarse salt and nothing else. Chimichurri, that bright green sauce of parsley, garlic, oregano, vinegar, and oil, sits on the table, but is never a marinade. The Sunday asado has been described as the Argentine Thanksgiving, except it happens 52 times a year. Argentina consistently ranks among the highest countries in the world for beef consumption per person, and the asado is the biggest reason why. Argentina and Uruguay share the gaucho tradition, but just across the border in southern Brazil, the gaucho legacy evolved into something very different. Brazilian churrasco traces back to the same cattle-herding culture that shaped Argentine asado. It emerged in the southernmost state of Rio Grande do Sul, where cattle roamed freely across the pampas from the 1500s onward. But while asado remained relatively simple, churrasco developed its own technique and eventually its own theater. The meat is skewered on long metal rods called espetos, crusted with coarse rock salt and roasted slowly over charcoal. The signature cut is picanha, the rump cap, a thick slab of beef with a generous fat cap left attached. It is folded into a C shape on the skewer, so the fat bastes the meat as it cooks and slowly renders. Picanha is so central to Brazilian barbecue that it is practically synonymous with churrasco itself. What brought churrasco to the rest of the world is the rodizio, a style of all-you-can-eat tableside service invented in the 1960s in southern Brazil. Servers dressed in gaucho attire circulate continuously through the dining room with loaded skewers, slicing portions directly onto each plate. Diners get a two-sided card. Green side up means keep the meat coming. Red side up means stop. The word rodizio is Portuguese for rotation, referring to the constant circulation of carvers through the dining room. Alongside the meat, churrasco is always accompanied by farofa, a toasted cassava flour mixture, vinaigrette, which is a fresh chopped tomato and onion salsa, and white rice with black beans. The entire experience is designed around abundance. You eat until you physically cannot continue, and in Brazil, that is considered a compliment to the cook. If you find this interesting, hit subscribe. I cover food stories like this every week. Churrasco puts the carving in the hands of the server. But in Korea, the cooking itself is in the hands of the person eating. Korean BBQ, known in Korean as gogigui, puts a grill in the center of the dining table and lets every person become their own cook. The tradition has deep roots. Grilled meat dishes in Korea trace back roughly 2,000 years to the Goguryeo kingdom, when nomadic peoples prepared a skewered dish called maekjeok over open fire. During the later Chosun dynasty, a refined grilled beef called nyobiani was served at the royal court. The marinades are where Korean barbecue sets itself apart. Bulgogi, meaning fire meat, is thinly sliced beef, marinated in soy sauce, sesame oil, garlic, sugar, and grated Asian pear. The pear is not there for sweetness. Its enzymes naturally break down the proteins in the beef, tenderizing the meat before it ever touches the grill. Galbi is marinated short ribs, often butterflied thin for even cooking. Samgyeopsal is thick-cut pork belly, completely unmarinated, grilled until the fat renders and the edges crisp. The way you eat it is just as specific. A piece of grilled meat goes into a lettuce or perilla leaf with rice, a sliver of raw garlic, and a dab of samjang paste. You fold it into a small bundle called a sam and eat it in one bite. The tabletop grill and the pork belly craze both took off in the 1980s, when beef prices rose and restaurants pivoted to cheaper pork cuts. Korean barbecue then spread internationally with the Korean wave of the 1990s and 2000s, and its influence reached one neighboring country in a way that surprised almost everyone. Japanese yakiniku looks and feels like a native Japanese tradition, but its roots are Korean. After World War II, ethnic Korean residents of Japan opened small grilled meat stalls in the post-war black markets of Osaka and Tokyo. They were cooking horomon, organ meats and offal, that most Japanese people at the time did not eat. The food was cheap, filling, and cooked over open charcoal. The stalls grew into permanent restaurants, and the cuisine needed a name that would work commercially. The word yakiniku, meaning grilled meat, was adopted partly because it was a neutral Japanese term that avoided the political tension between North and South Korea. Over the following decades, yakiniku became something distinctly Japanese. As American beef imports surged and Japan's own Wagyu industry expanded, the focus shifted from offal to premium marbled beef. Today, a yakiniku restaurant is a refined experience. Paper-thin slices of Wagyu are placed on a tabletop grill, seared for just seconds on each side, then dipped into a light soy-based sauce called tare. The emphasis is on the quality of the cut itself, with individual pieces often labeled by the exact section of the animal they came from. Yakitori is an entirely separate tradition. These are charcoal-grilled chicken skewers, and the craft lies in using nearly every part of the bird, including cuts like bonjiri, the small fatty tail nub that would be discarded in most Western kitchens. Both yakiniku and yakitori share a single principle. Heat should reveal what is already in the meat, not cover it up. Yakiniku is grilled at the table, but in the siu-mei shops of southern China, the meat never touches a flat grill at all. Char siu is Cantonese barbecue pork, and the name literally translates to fork roast, a reference to the traditional method of skewering strips of pork on long forks and holding them over open fire. In modern Hong Kong and Guangdong province, the method is far more controlled. Strips of marinated pork hang vertically inside cylindrical charcoal ovens, roasting from every side at once, while dripping fat creates smoke that flavors the meat from within the chamber. The deep red color of char siu is one of its most recognizable features, and the source surprises a lot of people. The traditional glaze gets its red tint not from food dye, but from namyu, a fermented red bean curd. The sweetness and lacquered sheen come from layers of honey and maltose brushed on during roasting, with 5-spice powder, hoisin sauce, and shaoxing rice wine rounding out the marinade. The result is pork, with a slightly charred, caramelized exterior and a tender, almost candy-like sweetness inside. Walk through any siu-mei shop in Hong Kong, and you will see rows of char siu hanging in the front window, alongside roast duck and crispy pork belly, all of them glistening under the lights. It is served sliced over steamed white rice, stuffed into soft steamed bao buns, or tossed with egg noodles in broth. Char siu is one of the most widely eaten forms of barbecue in East and Southeast Asia, and the technique of roasting vertically inside a sealed chamber connects it, unexpectedly, to one of the oldest cooking vessels on Earth. The tandoor is a cylindrical clay oven that has been used on the Indian subcontinent for roughly 5,000 years. Clay ovens have been found at archaeological sites from the Indus Valley Civilization, including settlements dating to around 3000 BCE. The oven reaches temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius, trapping intense heat inside its thick clay walls. Naan bread is slapped directly onto the inner surface, where it bakes in seconds. Meat is lowered in on long skewers, cooking in the fierce radiant heat. But tandoori chicken, the dish the tandoor is now famous for, is not ancient at all. It was invented in the 1920s by a Punjabi restaurateur named Kundan Lal Gujral at his restaurant Moti Mahal in Peshawar, in what was then undivided British India. Gujral marinated whole chickens in yogurt mixed with chili, turmeric, and a blend of ground spices, then cooked them in the tandoor, an oven that had until then been used almost exclusively for baking bread. The yogurt served a double purpose. It tenderized the chicken through its natural acidity, and it formed a coating that kept the meat moist in the extreme heat, while the edges charred and the juices stayed sealed inside. After the partition of India in 1947, Gujral migrated to Delhi and reopened Moti Mahal, where tandoori chicken was served to prime ministers and visiting heads of state. And then came an accident. When unsold tandoori chicken dried out on the skewer at the end of a long night, Gujral simmered the leftover pieces in a tomato and butter gravy to rescue them. That improvised dish became butter chicken, one of the most popular Indian dishes on the planet, born entirely from yesterday's leftovers inside a 5,000-year-old oven. Every one of these traditions started the same way. Someone put meat near fire. But what happened after that? The wood they chose, the clay they shaped, the spices they reached for, the people who carried the knowledge across oceans and through centuries, is what makes each one entirely its own. The oldest evidence of humans cooking with controlled fire is roughly 780,000 years old, found at an archaeological site in what is now Israel. The methods have changed completely. The instinct has not. We have been gathering around fire for as long as we have been human.